Assalamualaikum and hi to everyone. How are you doing? Great. Uh, okay, so today we are going to learn about biology for form. Okay, but first thing first, who know what is the topic for today? Yes, okay. Our topic today will be on the plasma membrane. But then, what it is about, I will show you. Okay, first thing first, let's watch this short video on osmosis.
If a solution is hypotonic, there is a greater concentration of solute within the cell than there is in the surrounding solution. As a result, water molecules enter the cell. As the water molecules continue to enter the cell becomes larger and larger. If water molecules continue to diffuse into the cell, it will cause the cell to swell up to the point that lysis or rupture may occur. In this demonstration, make a cut between molecule and the cell was balanced. Molecule. A solution is hypertonic. There is a greater concentration of solute outside the cell than there is inside the cell. As a result, water leaves the cell and the cell shrinks. In this demonstration, a 3 centimeter and if a solution is isotonic, there is an equal concentration of solute both inside and outside of the cell. Although water molecules continuously move into the cell and out of the cell, the concentration on both sides of the semi-permeable membrane remain the same. In this demonstration, a cell was again formed from the dialysis tubing and was filled with tap water. After both ends of the cell were securely fastened, this cell also was weighed on a digital balance. The cell was placed in a beaker of tap water for half an hour. As you can see.
Okay, so just now we are watching the osmosis in 3 different concentrations, which is hypertonic, hypotonic, and then the last one is isotonic. So to explain, it's simply like a balloon. Some of the liquid you can find in our universe is like water. So when you insert it inside the balloon, it will not break after you put it water inside the balloon. So it will remain the shape of the circle. But then if you use other type of water, for example, hot water or cold water, the balloon will either shrink or burst. That's why it's different solutions in the osmosis. So now, wait there. Let me open the presentation. Okay. So today we are going to learn about the concept of movement of substances across a plasma membrane, which is a biology for form. And then by the end of this lesson, we should be able to describe by using examples movement of substances across a plasma membrane, which is active and passive transport. And then from that 2 examples, you will compare and then you will contrast between passive transport and active transport. Everyone ready to go? Give action, give action. Okay. All right. So without further ado, let's start our instruction on active and passive transport. First thing first, passive transport. Remember the name, passive transport. The example that we use will be osmosis, which is the transport of water, osmosis. Okay, what is osmosis? Osmosis is simply a type of passive transport that involves the movement of water molecules only the movement of water molecules only. It is similar to diffusion, but diffusion works in lipid-soluble substances, but then in terms of osmosis, it involves the water molecules only. But that's why it's only specific to water. Next, there are 3 key terms of osmosis, which is water potential, whether it's high or low, and selectively permeable membrane. If the water potential is high, it means that it has more water molecules and fewer solutes. If the water potential is low, it means that it has fewer water molecules and more solutes. Okay, that is the water potential. If for selective permeable membrane, it allows water to pass through, but then it blocks some solutes. This membrane is the one that we use for osmosis. For example, some solids such as sucrose or big molecule sugars like triglycerides, they will be blocked. But then from that membrane, it will still allow water to pass through. That gives the name, it is selective and it is permeable membrane. Hence, the selectively permeable membrane. Okay. Now, this is the mechanism of osmosis. As you can see, this is the water potential from, this is the high water potential, and this is the low water potential of two sides of the tube. Now, as you can see, the sucrose molecule over here is low. Okay, the water molecule over here is high. Hence, it gives that more water molecules, and then it has fewer solids. In this example, the solids will be sucrose molecule. In low water potential, the water molecules are fewer, but then there are more solids in the low water potential. Hence, the low water potential. And this is the selectively permeable membrane. Like I said before, it is selective, which it allows water to pass through, but then it blocks some solids. For example, in this example is sucrose. So what happened is actually to transport water from the high to the low water potential, it is to achieve dynamic equilibrium. In other words, they want to balance between the inside and the outside of the tube in terms of water and sucrose, which is the solute. Thus, from the high water potential, it moves down the concentration gradient. So from the high water potential, it moves the water to the low water potential. Then it achieves dynamic equilibrium, which is the solids and water molecules in both of the side of the tube has been balanced. Through the phospholipid bilayer, you can see it's like this. If we zoom it in the selectively permeable membrane, it's like this, where water molecule can pass through the membrane from the high water potential to the low water potential. Okay, so far, is there any question? Okay. Now, Harith, I want to ask you a question. What is the name of the membrane that I mentioned just now? What is the characteristic? Selectively permeable membrane. True. Now, let me ask question again. Khairul, if there are more water soluble, if there are more water molecules, what does that? And low solids. Okay. High water potential. True. So the key terms for that is high water potential. And then now, Arshad, if high water potential has more water molecules, so the low water potential will have yes, true. Okay, true. So that is the correct answer. One star for you. Okay. Now, that is for osmosis, which is passive transport. Because it goes down the concentration gradient or the potential gradient, it does not require any energy. In other words, if you on the top of the hill and you want to go down using a bicycle, you don't have to like cycle it down. It will eventually you will get to the down of the hill on itself. So it requires no energy. Okay. Now, The second one is active transport. The example we're going to use is sodium potassium pump. Okay. Everyone ready? Okay. Now, the definition of the active transport. First, active transport is the movement of a substances across a plasma membrane using energy. Using energy. It moves substances against the concentration gradient. So, if from the low to the high concentration, if just now the osmosis, it moves following the concentration gradient. Now it moves against the concentration gradient, which is from low to high concentration. Now, let me explain. The key characteristics of this transport is requires ATP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate, which means that energy comes from cellular respiration. Okay, it's like this. Imagine that your body uses cellular respirations. The product is ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. When protein with specific binding sites is bind with ATP, they produce energy, and then it enables the transport across the membrane. Okay, let me repeat. Carrier protein, and then specific binding sites, and then this carrier protein bind with ATP molecules, and then it enables energy, it converts into energy, and then the transport could happen. Okay, for example, one analogy that I want to give to you, it's like rapid bus. Who's here ever go with rapid bus? Okay, Mustaqim and okay, Mustaqim. All right. Okay. Now, from the rapid bus, you know that you have to have the specific card. The specific card with cost. Now, imagine the bus is the specific carrier protein. You have to have the TNG card, which is the specific binding site, and then you have to have the cost. You have to have the money inside the card, and then which you will bind to the bus, or in other words, you will pay lah. You will pay the rapid service in order for it to transport, to go. So that is what basically happens in active transport. You will use specific carrier proteins and then specific binding sites, bind with ATP molecules, and then it changes shape, and then it transports across the membrane. Now, let me ask a question. Okay. Mustaqim, what are two conditions for active transport that I mentioned just now?
There are two conditions of active transport, I think. Active transport needs specific material, specific molecule, and its specific binding site, and also need an entity to allow it to cross the membrane.
Okay, correct. That's the correct answer. Now, from that answer, you understand that the need of the specific carrier protein and the site and then the ATP. Now, let's look into the process summary. Where the molecule or the ion, the molecules of the ion binds to the carrier protein, which ATP also binds to release energy. When the release of the energy changes the shape of the carrier protein, thus the molecule or the ion is transported across the membrane. Okay? First thing first, molecules or the ion is like the people inside the bus. Inside the bus, it binds to the carrier protein. It enters the bus, the rapid bus. Now, ATP binds to the bus. For the example that I gave just now, the rapid card is used to pay for the bus, which bind to it and then release energy. Now, the rapid bus has energy to move, to transport it. So, the molecule or the ion inside the bus is transported across to where they want, which is across the membrane. So, the function of it is to accumulation of or accretion of substances in the cell, and then carrier proteins, also they called pumps. Okay. But then, before further ado, let's see the sodium potassium pump first. Okay, I will give you 2 minutes. I will give you 1 minute to understand the process. Okay, now go. Okay, now let's look into this example of sodium potassium pump. Basically the same thing. It's just the process summary that I gave just now. Okay, the process that I gave just now is first thing first, molecule or ion binds to the carrier protein, and then ATP binds and release energy. Okay, let's see to the example. First thing first, the molecules or the ions are sodium ions, which binds to the carrier protein. And then ATP molecules bind to the carrier protein and decompose into ADP. Okay, it's like when you spend the money becomes deceased to you. Okay, so it decomposes into ADP. It becomes someone else. So from ATP molecules, it decomposes into ADP, and then what is next step is it release energy. Okay, it release energy where in this step, phosphate bond inside the carrier protein that is bound is providing energy. Thus, it changes the shape of the carrier protein from before it's locked in the middle in the upper side. Then after the changes of the shape of the carrier protein, it allows the sodium ion to be transported through the carrier protein out of the cell. From here, low sodium concentration, energy binds and then changes the shape of the carrier protein, and thus sodium ion is transported through the carrier protein out of the cell. Now, basically that's all about the active transport. And then the molecular ion is transported across the membrane. This process alone. Now, okay, let's go to our conclusion and our quiz time. Okay. Alia, okay. What do you think is the first differences between active and passive transport?
What was it?
What is the first differences? The first differences between active and passive transport.
First differences is that it is against the concentration gradient and following the concentration gradient.
True. Okay, one step for you. Okay, so basically the active transport against the concentration gradient, and then the passive transport follows the concentration gradient. Okay, now Arshad, the second differences. I mentioned it a lot of times. Okay, what is the second differences between the active and passive transport?
Okay, for the passive, it's only for it doesn't require any energy, and for the active, it requires energy.
Okay, true. One step for you. Okay, That is the correct answer. That is the correct answer. So, like I said before, like the hill, okay? You are cycling down toward the hill or upward the hill. So, Alia just now said that if you are using passive transport, it's like you are running downward the hill or cycling down the hill. It does not require energy. But then when you against the concentration gradient, you are like cycling uphill. Thus, you require energy. True, true, true. So that is the second differences. Now, Mustaqim, what is the similarities? What is the similarities between active and passive transport?
I think first across the transport membrane is correct.
Okay, true. Whether it's active or passive transport, it means that membrane or the molecules is transported. Okay, any substances when it is transported, it means that the substance is moved across the membrane. It's like gate. Okay, it's like a gate. So when you said about passive and active transport, it's like there are movement of substances across that membrane, across that gate. Okay. Second, similarities. Harith, what is the second similarities between active and passive transport?
Both of the transport use four.
Uses
I remember
the membrane. The membrane. What is the
the
characteristic?
membrane, the four membrane,
Selectively.
the permeable.
True. Selectively permeable membrane. So when you have the passive and active transport, it's like gate. Okay, it's like the gate. So when you have the gate, you have to have those holes. So, but then you have to be selective about it. You want to know what you want to be. You want to know what is it to be transported and what's not. So it's like the osmosis. Let me show you again. Okay. It likes the osmosis where it blocks the solute, but then it allows the water molecules to pass through. Okay, now the last differences between passive and active transport. Khairul, what do you think is the last differences between active and passive transport? Okay, just now we said about it requires energy. It requires energy, and then we also the concentration gradient is also included as the differences. Now, what is the destination? If the passive transport is to achieve an equilibrium, what about active transport? Okay, for example, okay, what do you think the last differences between active and passive transport?
Wait, can you repeat what you said last?
Okay, I said that, okay, in active transport, there are accumulation or disposal of molecules or ions. Okay, for example, in the slide I mentioned just now, okay, the function of it is to accumulation or extraction, or we said that substances is being a lot over here and then we want to move it upward the hill. Okay, that is for active transport. But then how about passive transport? What is the destination? What do we want to do with passive transport?
From high to low.
Okay, from high to low, do you remember what is the condition for that?
The high water and low water potential.
Okay, that is true, but the name for that condition is called dynamic equilibrium. So that is what we want to achieve in osmosis of the passive transport, which is the from high to low water potential, it moves the water molecules to achieve the dynamic equilibrium. Okay, now to sum up the conclusion for the similarities and differences of active and passive transport, this is the bubble map. Okay, as you can see, in passive and active transport, the similarities are moving a substance across a membrane. It's like a gate. You know, you have to move the other from other side to the other side. There are something substance to be moved. No, It occurs through a selectively permeable membrane. Imagine that the gate has guards, so you know what should be moved and what should not. The differences. Now, active transport requires energy, and passive transport does not require energy. Why? Because the active transport occurs against the concentration of the gradient, and the passive transport occurs following the concentration of the gradient. Now, this is the recent question I gave to Khairul, which is active transport occurs when there are accumulation and disposal of molecules or ions. For example, just now, sodium and potassium ions. But then, for passive transport, it occurs until a dynamic equilibrium is achieved. Means that from here to here, it's balanced already. So, it occurs until a dynamic equilibrium is achieved. So, do we have any question? Okay, Arshad. Give me your question. What is the question? You can use the mic.
Okay, so we know that isotopic gives the substance to move in and out. Like if the water molecule is isotopic on the outside and the inside of the cell, the water molecule will exchange like continuously and what you call the equally. So what about molecules such as ions, maybe like phosphate, when they are in the isotonic state, do they like move in and out equally or it doesn't happen at all?
Okay, that is the other type of passive transport. Okay,
Can you ask me your point? So,
okay. It's called.
it's your mind.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. All right, thank you. Okay, that is another type of transport, type of passive transport, which is the diffusion. Okay, like we mentioned just now. That is a very good question. Okay, now the osmosis is the type of transport that involves the movement of water molecules only. Like I said, it's similar to diffusion. That's a very good question. Now I will explain a little bit about diffusion. Diffusion is a type of passive transport. It does not require energy. It does not require ATP. It relies on the natural movement of particles. Okay, natural movements of particles. But then it's the same. It's the same. It's from high concentration to the low concentration until equilibrium is reached. There's two types of diffusion in this, which is simple diffusion. For example, the gave just now is like molecules. For example, oxygen or carbon dioxide entering or leaving the cells. It is using the simple diffusion. But then, if the second type of diffusion is facilitated diffusion, okay, the facilitated diffusion, the molecules will move through channel or carry proteins in the membrane. But then it's still passive. It's still passive because it does not require any energy. The molecules move in the carrier protein without using energy. For example, glucose entering the cells through the glucose transporter. It means that it has specific transporter of its own. For example, like for going to Johor, we will use only, for example, SC Express, for example. So there are specific transporter from going to a place to another place. That is the facilitated diffusion. Okay. Does that answer the question, Arshad?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I read the question. It's a very interesting question. Okay, you are right. Even in isotonic condition, condition, which is the already dynamic equilibrium, the dynamic equilibrium already achieved, ions and water molecules will still move in and out of the cell. But then, there, here's how it works. Okay, here's how it works. Isonic means concentration of solutes like ions equal inside and outside the cell. So there are no net movement. For example, like there are no net movement of water and iron inside or outside the movement. Okay, but then it doesn't mean the movement stops. It's like the tube. It's like the tube just now. You know that the high water potential moves the low. The high water potential moves to the low water potential, but then it doesn't mean that the movement already stopped. Okay, but then the molecules and the ions that moves across the membrane will have the same rate. Means that the rate of the entry through the selectively permeable membrane equal to the rate of the exit. So that's what it means by dynamic equilibrium. It still achieves the equilibrium. It still achieves the balance. And then the movement never stops. It's just that the rate of the entry across the membrane equals to the rate of the exit across the membrane. Okay. So that is the answer. Does that answer your question? Okay. Now, do you have any other question?
So, okay. Understand that explanation is very beautiful.
Okay. All right. Now, we have achieved the learning standard that we have set just now, which is how to describe by using examples of moving of substances, which is passive and active transport. For example, for passive transport, it is osmosis, and then for active transport, it is sodium potassium pump. And then you also know to compare and contrast between passive transport and active transport. Okay, so that's the end of our lesson for today. Okay, so before we go, let's take a picture in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so that's the end of our lesson. Thank you.